If I can have everybody's attention, we'll go ahead and convene our meeting here. We're here for the Elevator Advisory Board meeting. We'll go through roll call first. Brian Morris, presiding officer, I am present. Scott Anderson.
Present.
Nancy Crumley.
Present.
Grayson Gill. He called in, he's absent. John McGraw.
Present.
Lawrence Taylor.
Present.
Jerry Matheny.
Present.
And Greg Tomas.
Present.
All right, very good. So we have a quorum. I guess while I'd like to say a couple words before we get started here. I guess let me put the mic here. Just as a reminder for the advisory board members, most of these meetings, I assume this one's being live streamed on the YouTube. So just make sure you announce your name and who you are and speak up. Also, just as general information, there is still one open seat on the advisory board for a public disabled member. So if anybody knows somebody that would like to be involved in the board, we need a public member so we can have a full board. Just there is an application online to do that. Also, I've been on the advisory board. I was thinking about, I don't know, 8, 9 years or something, and the staff that we work with on a daily, annual basis is wonderful. Everybody with TDLR is very helpful, very informative, very nice. Helps us look great, I think, because you all do a great job for us. But one of the gentlemen that helped us out a whole lot, we lost him last year, so I just wanted, all the board members that knew him were aware of this. We just want to make sure that the family and everybody's aware that we miss George Ferry. All right. So I guess we'll move on to item C, the training of the board members. First item is Open Meeting Act.
Mr. Chairman, board members, for the record, Charles Johnson, Assistant General Counsel. This portion of the meeting is a mandatory training and mandatory to emphasize the importance of the discussion and the topics mandated by the legislature, so you know it's important. What we have here is the Elevated Advisory Board meeting, the periodic training, and get this turned around right. This is not my morning. Oh, it helps. Excuse me. We are about to enter the world of administrative law. And when you hear administrative law, you're really talking about three different things. You're talking about the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedures Act, and the Public Information Act. Those three combined together is characterized as administrative law. Let's start with the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act is the reason, one of the reasons you're here today, is that the purpose of the act is to ensure that the government is open and transparent to the citizens of the state. And if you think about open meetings, rather than a set of rules, if you think about it in the context of a concept, and the concept is open government is good government. And that's what we're all here to try to achieve. And so the act requires that all meetings be open and transparent, that the meetings be preceded by notice, because without a notice, no one knows that we're here. And so the purpose is that people who receive notice either can attend the meeting, or, as you all know, we broadcast over the internet. So they also have an opportunity to listen in from wherever they're located. And so this is the driving factor and concept behind open meetings is notice. And the concept of notice, the statute and the guidelines for open meetings says that if there's a question about whether or not something is an open meeting, the act is liberally construed, meaning that we construe it in the context of it's an open meeting and it requires notice. So keep that in mind, is that if there's any questions about what we're doing complies with the Open Meetings Act, it's going to be construed or interpreted to require that the provisions of the act be met. And so once we've got a notice out, then the question becomes deliberations. And the act defines deliberations as a verbal exchange during a meeting of a quorum of the members. Don't lock into the fact that it talks about a verbal exchange, because if you exchange documents amongst yourselves in a quorum of the members, you've not had any verbal discussion, but a meeting took place just the same. So keep in mind, it's about the sharing of information between a quorum of the board. And so a meeting, a quorum is what's required to make a meeting. So anytime there's a quorum of the members participating in the room or in a discussion about, and this is the important piece, business that involves the public policy or the business of this board. So if you're talking about anything related to elevators, no matter how large or small, you've got a quorum present in that discussion, you are having a meeting. Whether you're in this room or anywhere in the world, you're having a meeting. Now, notice is something that happens. It's something that the agency staff takes care of. You'll notice at the end of every meeting, they ask you about the time and date for the next meeting. The reason for that is we can provide the notice that's required by the Act. And so, in addition to the notice of the time and place, the subject matter. So you'll hear a request for issues at the end of this meeting. We'll ask you, is there anything you want to talk about in your next meeting? The reason for that is so we can put those topics on the agenda and provide notice to the public that in your next meeting you'll be talking about certain issues, X, Y, or Z. So it's important. Anything that happens in this meeting that's not on the agenda for this meeting that arises you want to have a discussion about, it goes to the next meeting. And being consistent with notice and letting the public be aware of the topics that you'll be engaged in discussion about. The other stuff here is kind of automatic. We do this stuff. We send to the Secretary of State. We count the days and so forth that the notice has to be filed. And so this is not something for you to be concerned with. It's just more informational. You know how the process is working. This is kind of the back office stuff. You've got a proper notice. A quorum is present. The meeting's about to start. Somebody's out in the hallway, and action is being taken. That person has to be in the room. Okay. In addition to being in the room, can there be an instance where there are informal meetings at a social function, what have you, that there's a quorum present, and so the question becomes: is that a meeting? It's only a meeting if we go back to the definition, which is a quorum present and discussing the business of the board. That is a controlling factor. If you're talking about the game on television last night, that's fair game. You can do that. But if you talk about, if it evolves into the business of the board, that's when you put the brakes on because you're not engaged in an open meeting. This is a kind of repetitive because it's important to, dang, I didn't intend to do that. Here we go. I'm sorry, I got lost in my slides. If you're engaged in a discussion that does not involve the business of the board, you're fine. But let's say that there's not a quorum. There's less than a quorum. There's three of you together at a social function, and you talk about elevator business. And two of those members contact two other members who were not a part of the original discussion. Is that a quorum? And the answer under the Open Meetings Act is yes, because you've engaged in what's considered a walking quorum. A walking quorum is where less than a quorum discuss the subject, and then members walk that discussion to the other members, which contaminates everybody, and a meeting is now taking place. you got to be aware of these walking quorums, and they occur in numerous situations. Conference calls, video conferences, hallway discussions, any of these activities that are normal, everyday events can be converted into an open meeting because there's a quorum, because you've walked that discussion to a quorum of the board. And so it occurs, it can occur through Facebook, Twitter, any of these social media mediums that are out there. You can accidentally walk your way into an open meeting just doing normal everyday activity without thinking. And so this purpose of this discussion is to get you to think about when you engage in social media. You're all responsible members engaged in different trade associations. You're active in your industry. And so it'll be easy for a chain email to go out with 50 people on it, and you don't really see who's on that email, and you hit reply all, and you've got a quorum of members scattered throughout that distribution list. You've just engaged in an open meeting accidentally, but it occurs just the same. And so, best practices. Always be aware of who's on that distribution list. If there is any questions about what you've just done, we're here to help you with those, to walk your way through that analysis to the answer. And so if you engage in social media and you think that you may have triggered an event that would be subject to open meetings, you contact us, and we'll kind of gather all the facts and walk you through whether or not what you've done is proper or not. But just be aware of this walking quorum concept. We're in a meeting, and topics come up as they normally do. The question becomes, remember we talked about the subject matter that goes onto the notice. If there's anything that comes up in the meeting that's not on the agenda, then you will hear someone, because we're all listening to that discussion, and we're all tracking the discussion, and we're tying it back to the agenda. And so if someone kind of interrupts the discussion because we believe that you've strayed off the subject matter, that's the reason for that is because of this. Is that you've got to stay on topic in terms of what's been posted. This comes up a lot in public comment, where someone comes up to the table and give a comment, and you want to engage that person. You can't do it because the topic has not been yet placed on the agenda, so the world doesn't have notice that you intended to have that discussion. The proper way to handle that would be to go back and to place it on the agenda for the next meeting, where the world's been noticed, and you're going to have that discussion, and that's all fair game. The important piece is to refrain from engaging in the discussion, no Q&A during public comment. And so I just kind of walk you into the best practices here, which is to avoid those responding to public comment, to place these items on future agendas, and we'll all be in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, and we can move to the substance of your meetings. Now, are there remedies? Yeah, there are remedies. Generally, they come from the media who tracks a lot of these discussions and raise concerns about whether or not there were improper discussions taking place. And there are also penalties associated with it. But because you're going to comply with best practices, you're going to be aware of your social media, you're going to stick to the agenda, you're going to not engage in discussions about the business of the board in social settings. These things become non-relevant to you. These are for those who accidentally or on purpose, because the Act talks about knowingly conspiring. But you don't want a judicial body determining your intent, whether you knowingly did something or not. So we're going to stay back off that line, and we're going to contact General Counsel's office if we have questions, and we're going to keep you off that line. And these become not relevant to you, but to the violators, which you will not be. This phrase is repetitive because it's the official business of the board. We've already gone through this thing about staying on topic, staying on the agenda, and there are various interpretations by the Attorney General's office. These are references. If you go to the Attorney General's website, there's a link to the public information, the public meetings documents, and all three of these acts will be there. And so these are just resources if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics. There's resources available for you to do that. The next area is administrative procedures. And I'm not going to go through, I'll let you read the slides. I'm going to give you kind of an overview, because the Administrative Procedures Act includes a lot of topics, but only two that relate to this board. One is you will hear the enforcement, in the enforcement report they'll talk about cases, SOA, and so forth. There's rules and procedures about how those cases are processed, not that they involve, you should involve yourself with the details of that. But just know that the contested cases and so forth are governed by the Administrative Procedures Act. The piece that is important to you is the rulemaking piece. The rulemaking piece is your primary function, because as you know, the statute requires that you advise the board, you advise the department, and the department works through rules. And so the rulemaking piece is the most important piece of this Administrative Procedures Act, which is referred to as the APA. Rules. What is a rule? It's a statement of policy. Any position the department takes that has a general applicability to the industry, consider that a rule. And so sometimes people talk about policy procedures that don't necessarily work their way into a rule, but if it's generally applicable to the industry, it has to be in a rule. And so just keep that piece in mind. This is how the rulemaking process works under the APA. There's an idea for a rule, and there's multiple sources is where that idea comes from. It works its way through the drafting process, and the first draft makes its way to you. You see the rules before the commission sees the rules, and so you have input at the first draft stage. From you, it goes to the Texas Register, where the world gets noticed. And so anybody who's interested in that rulemaking can provide comments, and 30-day comment period. General Counsel looked at those comments, characterize them, summarize them for you to an extent, and then the rule comes back to you. So you see the rule twice before the commission sees it the first time. And this is your chance to go back and make corrections, additions, respond to the comments, and then it goes to the commission. So you've seen it twice, the commission sees it once. If they agree with the recommendations, they adopt it, and it goes to the register, and it becomes effective as a rule 20 days after it goes back to the register. So that's how the rulemaking process works, and that's the piece of the APA that you should be more concerned with than the contested case piece. We have a second process called a rule review. Rule review is by statute every 4 years. Every rule has to be examined and determine whether or not it's still necessary to have that rule. And so you'll hear periodically every 4 years we'll bring your elevated rules back to you as a rule review. Not necessarily meaning that we're going to make any changes, but it goes out to the public. They get a chance to respond. If we believe there's anything in their comments that's worthy of a rulemaking, then we'll open that process up into rulemaking. Again, resources on the Attorney General's website, and that takes us to the final piece, the Public Information Act. And this is of even less importance to you because this is more agency responsibilities, but it's important to you because you may receive from the public, one of your members of your associations of some sort, may have a question and they ask you for something, and they expect that since you are connected to the commission, that you will respond. Well, don't do that. The Act requires that there's specific timelines for responses, and the Act says that if the agency has an electronic process for open records, then that is the process to be followed. If you look at our website, at the very bottom of the page, there's a link that says open records. Refer that person there. Don't be the repository for requests from friends, relatives, or coworkers, because there's some deadlines that have to be met. Generally, there's 10 days to respond. And every document that we have, the presumption is that it is open to the public and should be provided, but the Act has a list of exceptions. And so every time a request comes in, we go through that list of exceptions to see if the document fits to one of those requirements. If it does, then we cannot withhold the document. We in turn send it to the Attorney General's office. They can, by statute, the only entity that can withhold and authorize withholding of a document. So it's important that you send them send those people requests to the website, which then allows us to follow the process. Because if we don't make a response within those 10 days, and there's something that's privileged or confidential, Social Security numbers, that kind of stuff, well, those are mandatory, which is a whole different set of rules. But the point I'm making is that let us make those decisions by referring a person to the website, and we will all be in compliance with the Public Information Act, and that concludes the presentation. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I would urge you that if you have any questions, concerns, that you contact General Counsel's office, because that's a part of our responsibility and obligation to the Commission and to the advisory boards. Thank you.
Thanks.
No questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, well, let's move to agenda item D, approval of minutes. I trust that the board members have had a chance to review the minutes. They were sent to us previously, and they're on our deal here. So, has anybody? Oops, my pin's all leaking.
I have some paper towel.
Has any board members have any comments to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the minutes as written.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
State your name, please.
Scott Anderson, second.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
So approved. All right, thank you. I've got nothing. Item E, public comments. So staff, do we have any public comments in for this meeting? All right, so we'll move on to agenda item F, which is staff reports. We'll start with the licensing division.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Tarsha Red, licensing manager for the elevator program. And as you can see on the report in front of you, we'll start with the little typo at the top. It's not September, it's January. It really is January. And just based on the numbers here, there's not been a lot of movement, although there are tons and tons of new elevators being installed probably daily. But the trend so far, everything is kind of staying about the same. As far as monthly, we're still registering the licenses for about 3,000 elevators per month. The amount of active equipment is relatively the same. Excuse me. The only significant change is the number of active designees, and it's probably not because they've necessarily dropped off, but a lot of elevator contractors are becoming their own designees. So it's not necessarily a decrease in the ability to have a designee, just people are learning better how to utilize that requirement to get the contractor license. Any questions?
Yes, this is Lawrence Taylor.
Yes.
Can you explain to us why we have 43,025 pieces of active equipment but only issued 15,079 certificates?
Well, that's because we're looking at it's just a snapshot at that moment. So there's the active equipment, but that's the number of pieces of equipment that was issued between September 1st and December 31st of 2017.
And
So-
again, this is Lawrence. Where would we find the total number of certificates issued for the year of 2017?
Well, I didn't run the number for the whole year, only because we had a meeting in September. So I took the number of equipment issued from the last meeting until today,
Again, this is Lawrence. Which meeting are you talking about?
the meeting in September.
Mary
Yeah.
Winston, TDLR. Mr. Taylor, would you like us to get those numbers for you?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
We can do that for you. So, and I've just voluntold you, but,
That's fine. It's
but
not a
we can
problem.
do that.
Yeah, we can get it.
We can do that.
Yeah,
We'll provide them
as
for
you may
the
recall,
meeting.
at a previous meeting 2 years ago, the numbers didn't match, and I was having trouble in my mind reconciling why we were only issuing so many certificates, but we had so many pieces of equipment, which to me appeared like either they weren't being inspected or we weren't issuing certificates. And there
Right,
had to be
and-
reasons,
Yeah.
one or the other, for that discrepancy.
Yeah, and I can understand that.
We'll get that for you, for everyone. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No other questions? All right.
Thank you.
very much. Next staff report would be Customer Service Division.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
Chair. So this is a first for us, except, of course, Lawrence. Customer service is a new addition to the advisory board
I'm
reports.
sorry, who are you?
My name is Trey Seals. I'm the Director of Customer Service. Thank you. This isn't an introduction today, so there are numbers I will report, but I wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are, and just to let you know that while we have not been present at the meetings, we are very much a part of the Customer Service Division. I call us the heart of the agency. And so we'll go over a brief overview. So just to tell our story and highlight a little bit about what we've done. First of all, we're a group of 50 individuals, 50 staff, a wonderful team of hardworking people. We take a lot of phone calls, and I'll get more into that detail just in a second. But we work in a fast-paced environment. We are the touchstone, as Brian used in one meeting, to most of the customers for the industries we regulate. For many of them, they will not speak to anyone else within the agency. So we do set the tone. We do represent the face of the agency to the public and to our licensees. We believe in customer engagement and resolution. So that is the why of what we do. We are there for the customer's success, whether it is a citizen needing to file a complaint or find whether an elevator has a current certificate. Whatever it is, we're there to make sure that we either know the answer or know who to go to get the answer. We believe also in reducing customer effort is one of our goals, and we believe that we can always improve, that we can always be better. But we're always looking for ways to improve the customer experience. So what we do is, as a frontline point of contact, and as I said, we a lot of times are the only point of contact, we take phone calls, we respond to emails, we assist walk-in customers in our front lobby at the main building. We respond to Facebook posts, we respond to tweets, and we basically help anyone and everyone who approaches the agency with getting to whatever their objective is. We help applicants through the application process, and we act as messengers, guides. We ask questions. We're a bridge to the agency. We share information both externally and internally. We share business intelligence because we do have our ear to the ground, and we are out front. We hear the stories, and we gather that information, and we report that back internally. We embrace change, and we're very innovative, and we're always finding new ways to do things, to the new challenges as they come. To review stats, we get so for the last fiscal year, we had about 500,000 calls. So let that settle in for a second, with 50 people. We, on a given day, Mondays and Tuesdays are our busier days. We take about 2,000 calls a day, 400 emails, and that translates to about 200 contacts, well over 200 contacts per hour. We're open from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. to allow customers to get in contact with us for a longer period of time. So as you can understand, and from those numbers and what I've just shared, we're quite busy. And we look calm, we look cool, we have fun, we laugh, but we work. So to go over the report for this month, for the first quarter of fiscal year 2018 for the elevator program, we have had for each month around 500 for the first 3 months, September, October, and November, phone calls and emails. And so we noticed that for this program that it's pretty evenly split between phone calls and emails. Some industries prefer to call, some industries prefer to email. In this particular program, most of our folks like to do both. And it could be anything from calculating fees or where's my certificate and just basic questions. But anything beyond, anything that needs subject matter expertise, as Lawrence very well knows, we get it to Jim at this point and make sure that we get those taken care of as quickly as we can. That concludes my report. I'm I'm happy to entertain any questions you have, and thank you for your time today.
I have one. This
Sure.
is Nancy. So if I'm on the elevator homepage and I want to contact the agency, the number that's there runs through your group first?
That is correct. The
Okay.
800 number and the local number. Yes.
That all runs through your group?
Yes.
Okay.
Mary Winston, TDLR. This is something that, this is a report that we historically did not give. Customer service, as Trey is saying, runs from 7A to 6P. Handled how many calls last year? 500,000?
500,000 calls.
And it's something that, and that's just the phone calls. They have front desk people, they handle the emails, and we have things coming in on the web and they handle. And it's something that they were just taken care of. We were used to it. I think Trey's probably hounded about it from time to time.
Yes.
And he always rises to the occasion, to the challenge. But we never made our advisory board members aware, excuse me, of the work that they were doing. So we'll get this report from here on out. Also, if there are any trends in your industry, excuse me, Trey's division will be the first to see that in their question and answer phone calls received. So if you have any additional questions for him, reach out to advisory.boards, we'll get it, but you'll get this report with every meeting.
Yes. And if I'm not here, one of my managers will represent for me at the meeting if for some reason I'm not able to make it.
Oh, yeah, Brian Morris. Yeah, I remember a couple years ago that bill had talked about trying to get some additional funding for more people for customer service. I think at one point you only had 20 people or so.
So yeah, I toyed with going into the history, but since, yeah, sure. So we started with, about 14 when I started in 2005, and we brought on cosmetology and barbering that year. Totally changed the agency's world. I came over with the program, so I had all the knowledge for cosmetology, so I was pretty good, but I wasn't so good with the other positions. But we quickly worked together with the director at that time, was Gene Mays, and we built a new call center. We slowly added on just wonderful people that have just given their heart and soul to make us a success. So we have come a long ways and from where we started.
Okay. And also, Brian Morris, I follow TDLR on Twitter.
Yes.
And so I appreciate the notices and the reminders about the advisory board meetings that are coming up for various ones. And I might be sitting on my desk and it comes on my phone, and, oh yeah, so I'll click it on and I'll,
So
I have no life, so I'll sit there and watch, other advisory board meetings and stuff. But again, the public notice is great.
I won't take credit for that. That is the Office of Strategic Communications, and that's Nick's team, and they have a wonderful group, Terry, but we do work very closely with their team.
Okay.
We actually respond to the questions that folks tweet us and post to Facebook, to the notices, actually. They'll find a notice, and they'll say, yeah, I have a question, and we have to be looking at those notices and making sure that we don't miss those questions that get attached to those notices that Terry puts out there. So absolutely, we work very closely together to get that content out there.
Well, I'm from El Paso, and I think Monday afternoon or Monday night, I saw the tweets that TDLR is going to be closed on Tuesday because of weather. And
Yes.
I'm like, it's sunny. I'm like, what weather? And it made me go to the Weather Channel. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah,
were you at?
it was that much snow and ice. But-
Okay. Great. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
As you well know, this is Lawrence Taylor. I'm
Yes,
a
sir.
numbers guy.
Yes, sir.
And I just ran the math.
Sure.
Did I hear you say about 243 an hour?
Yes, sir.
Well, when you do the math, it works out to 245 a day. At 500,000 calls at roughly 2,040
Yes,
days
sir.
a year,
Yes,
that's
sir.
a long ways from 200 and some an hour.
I understand. So the fiscal year, last year was 500,000 contacts. This year, for the first quarter, it's changing. So we will continue to update as we go, but we do include all contacts. So we do include phone calls, emails, walk-ins, tweets, and Facebook posts. So those are ballpark numbers that I'm giving you right now. I could go in, if more than happy to provide that for you, the commission reports and the reports that we've done, but.
This is Lawrence again. I don't believe that's necessary.
Okay, all right.
But I was sitting here and doing the math in my head.
Yes, sir.
So that just doesn't add up.
No worry.
So,
I understand.
So just for clarification, Mary Winston, calls versus contacts,
Right.
and we're getting to the number.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, and that's something that we did change over from calls, because we used to just report calls, and then we said, you know what, we do a lot of work through other channels. We need to actually change that name and call it contacts. So I'm still moving back and forth between calls and contacts, so I apologize on that.
This
I
is also,
probably misspoke.
this is a new report for Trey. So he leads a team, he has several employees, staff members, but the comfort or discomfort of sitting in that seat is real. So,
I'm totally home, but
yeah.
I
but
understand.
Great.
Thank you.
We're not intimidating, but you are on YouTube, so hey, there's the pressure.
Actually, I have a couple friends watching today. I happened to mention, they're like, oh, what time? So that adds a little extra.
John McGraw, how expensive are your metrics going to be on this report? I mean, are you going to show the wait time on hold for calls?
We don't get into that level of detail typically in the advisory board report, but
Do you track those?
We sure do.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
because,
sir.
that's the one big metric that for an end user who calls
Yes,
TDLR
sir.
on a fairly regular basis
Yes, sir.
can be the most aggravating.
Oh, yes.
The interminable wait, occasionally the hanging up because I've got a meeting I got to go to. And
Yes, sir.
I've been on hold for 40 minutes and there's no response. Oh.
Yeah, I will say that we do open at 7 a.m. and we do shut down at 6, so early or late is a little easier. Mondays and Tuesdays are our busiest days. And I know that, most people are getting to work, they're getting back to, the beginning of the week, they've got these agendas that they need to take care of, and we do get slammed. But towards the end of the week, things quiet down just a little bit. But actually, we do offer our callback feature. I understand, though, that it can be a wait.
Well,
I
that was
won't
my
deny
only
it.
question. That if we're not measuring it and tracking it, we
Yes,
don't
sir.
know when we need to put more
Yes, sir.
people on.
We, as I said, the new fiscal year and the new programs that we took on in November have caused us to change some of our approaches to how we handle the traffic to make sure that we keep those lines clear. And the next week to week and a half, we're implementing a new, we call it Specialization 3.0. And we're constantly looking and monitoring and seeing, okay, this scenario doesn't work. And one of the things that Brian has taught us is to be quick to fail and to try things and to try until we figure it out. And we figure it out, and then, the factors change, something happens, and then that no longer, and we have to be adaptive, and we are resilient. We are creators, and we do look for solutions. So I hear your comments and take it to heart, and we look at all of that, and we'll
And
address it.
Mr. McGraw, excuse me,
Yes.
they have this amazing running table on the wall. I'm sure there's a technical name for it that I don't know. But the teams are separated. We know which team has been on hold for which program, for how long, how many calls they've taken. So they capture a lot. It's like a running tally the whole time. So he can go as deep as you want to go, but I don't know if you want all that information.
I just thought maybe for maybe an average of response time for the different categories for emails, for phone.
Okay.
How long's the average wait time
Okay.
on hold?
Okay.
How long is the average response time for emails? Just to kind of give us a feel for
I understand.
when you're on the waiting end, it seems like it's forever.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And 5 seems like 10. Absolutely. I get that. Yes, sir.
One question here, Scott Anderson. And I'm not totally familiar with the whole department. When you say 500,000 calls, that's to TDLR in general? Because I heard you
Yes, sir.
mention cost.
Yes, sir.
Can you give us a feel for what percentage you feel is elevator, escalator related in your phone calls?
It represents a smaller percentage of the overall contacts. It's not, I
I'm
would
not going to
say,
hold you, 20%, 5%?
oh, I would say 7%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah, yeah. Cosmetology is still the largest volume in terms of volume of calls.
This is Lawrence Taylor
Yes,
again.
sir.
Again, being the numbers.
I
guy.
know. I saw your expression.
And wanting to point out
Yes,
that
sir.
if these numbers are right, what a monumental task you guys have. If
Yes,
you
sir.
have 243 contacts an hour
Yes, sir.
on 2,040 days a year at 11 hours a day, that's 5,452,920 contacts. Do you think that's a pretty accurate number?
I would need to see that visually. I heard what you said, but I'm not
You have 11 hours a day.
following, calculating.
From
that.
7 to 6 is 11 hours.
Sure.
And even though the agency's not open every day,
Right.
there's roughly 2,040 working days a year.
Okay.
Hours. 2,000.
Oh, excuse me.
Working hours.
240 days. Hold on a minute.
Okay, okay.
Say, your years are long, Lawrence.
Just feels that way.
I'm more visual, so I would need to,
641,520. Does that sound more?
that sounds more
Well, that's still,
in.
when I saw that 5 million, when I incorrectly did the math, and a real man admits when he made a mistake.
No. I was just, wait,
But
what?
still, 641,000 contacts, whether
Yes,
it's
sir.
tweet, phone
Yes, sir.
calls,
Yes, sir.
emails,
Yes,
is
sir.
still a monumental
it is
task
monumental, yes, sir.
to address, I would say.
You're correct. And we are looking, just to give you, I had things that I could add, and so I'm glad that we're bringing them out. So what we started out is focused on service and just receiving the calls. That's where we started. Now we're proactive because we realized, hey, this is not going to reduce in number. This is only getting bigger. So what can we do to get in front of it and help reduce these contacts? So we are feeding business intelligence back to the agency, to the other divisions. Hey, if we can change this content on the site here, that'll eliminate this number of contacts. If we can tweet this out, or if we can send an email to our group on this particular topic, it seems that they get tripped up here. Can we change the application? We're constantly feeding that information back to our Office of Strategic Communications, to licensing, to education. And so that's where we're headed now, is that we need to figure out a way to cut it off at the root, as I was taught growing up, to go to the root of it and get it there. And hopefully we can eliminate and become more proactive and reduce, because it is a large task. It is overwhelming at times.
Very good.
We persevere.
Any other comments? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
did-
much.
You
Good to
did
meet you.
well.
Thank you.
The next staff report would be Enforcement Division.
Good morning. My name is John Mellock, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. We'll kind of go through some of the case highlights first. All these will be agreed orders, which is always a nice thing for the Enforcement Division. We can come to an agreement. With that said, the first one was an agreed order that we entered into at the beginning of September with New River Center Mall, second LP, in the amount of $18,375. They were cited for numerous missed inspections. They failed multiple to file their inspection reports on time, and there were also some, we found out to be some new equipment that had yet to be inspected before it was placed in the service. They did bring all these issues into compliance, filed all the late reports, pay all the applicable late fees, and currently they've paid $7,658 towards that settle amount. They're on a payment plan, so they'll continue to make those payments throughout. The next one was also an agreed order with Nandy Patty Family Limited Partnership. They failed to file in their inspection reports and pay those applicable fees for the 2014 inspection, failed to get the 2015 inspection, and then failed to file the report and pay those fees for the 2016 inspection. Again, they came to compliance, got all the late inspection reports turned in, paid those fees, and they paid a payment or a penalty amount of $3,750, and they paid that all in full. The next one was with Medical Center Southwest Limited. They failed to have their elevator inspected in 2016. And it was actually a result due to a fire, so they didn't think they needed to have that elevator inspected, but they still did. They eventually just took the elevator out of service, had it removed from service under that new procedure that we have. They went ahead and paid a settlement payment of $750. On October, we had another agreed order with Lakeside Campus Partners, LP. They had placed altered equipment back into service without getting the necessary inspections. They then went back after we were discovered it, went back, got everything inspected, turned in all their inspection reports, and made sure everything was in compliance. And they paid a penalty of $2,750. The final case was an agreed order with the University of Texas system. They failed to have 2 elevators inspected. They got those elevators inspected, and they also paid a penalty of $2,000. Looking at some of the different statistics that we have, we've given you statistics from the fiscal year of 2017 and the fiscal year as it has gone through November of this year, or of actually of 2017, because our fiscal year starts in September. As you can see, in 2017, we opened almost 300 cases, closed a little bit more than 300 cases. Now, the reason those numbers don't necessarily match is not because not every case will sometimes span over different fiscal years, and the reason you don't see all the agreed orders don't match is because cases can be closed in numerous different ways. Agreed orders, default orders, or maybe there wasn't a violation, or maybe there was a warning issued. So that's sometimes why some of those numbers don't match up. But the one thing I did want to point out was if you look at the numbers of penalties assessed and collected in this program versus some of the other programs or with the agency in general, you'll see that we have a higher rate of collections with the elevator program than we do in some of the other programs. Mainly that's because the buildings aren't going anywhere, and usually the elevators aren't going where people tend to migrate and move, and it's a lot easier to find the physical location of a building. And typically the buildings are always being used. It's very frequently we have like a building that the elevators are just the building's vacant and nothing's being used, or the building's been torn down. So that's typically why we have that. And we also have the added feature of a shutdown. We can actually physically go in and shut down the elevators if they're not in compliance, or if they haven't had inspections, or they pose some kind of safety risk. And that's usually an extra little kind of tool that the prosecutors have to try to enforce some of these compliance and get some of these penalties paid. But if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Lawrence Taylor. I've got a question about the February 17 item, which was with
Lakeside campus? Yes, sir.
I'm assuming, and we all know what happens when you assume, but these alterations that were performed, were they performed by a licensed elevator contractor in this state?
I believe they were, but I don't, I don't have that part of the case highlights in front of me, but I can go back and double check that. But most likely they probably were done by a licensed elevator contractor. It's just they got placed back into service before.
Well, which leads me to my next question. Was any action taken against the elevator contractor for allowing them to go back in action?
Good point. I would have to go back and look that up. I'm not 100% sure, but I can go back and double check that. But usually in a case like that, if we discover that a building has placed an elevator back in service, we'll go back and double check who the contractor was, one, to ensure that they were licensed, and two, that if we need to open up an action against them, that we open up an action against them.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next staff report is Education and Examination Division.
Good morning, Chairman and staff. My name is Lorraine Srofe, and I'm with the Education and Examination Division. You should have your report in front of you, which, if you will notice, we did provide our division chart because there has been some changes. We've added an inspection team, and we also added the driver, offender, and safety education team. We develop not only continuing education, but also pre-license education requirements, exam requirements. We conduct the inspections and audits of all education providers, and we also determine compliance through those inspections and audits. On the second page of the report, we provided to you the continuing education information, which shows that we currently have 6 continuing education providers, and we currently have 25 courses available to those responsible parties that need to complete continuing education. Other than that, that is the only dealings we have with the elevator industry, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Nancy Crumley. Hi.
Yes.
The courses that are available, are those online, or are they in class, or?
There is both. If you go to the website, it gives you a more clear breakdown as to whether or not the course is provided by classroom or internet. Most of those courses are with the National Elevators Association, and a lot of those are classroom courses, but they do have a few online courses where they've, for example, they may videotape a classroom course and show that. So, but if you would like to have that particular breakdown, I could easily get that for you from the website.
No, I can go look. I
Okay.
was just curious. Thank
Yes.
you.
All right, if there's no other questions, that concludes my report. Thank you.
The next staff report is Compliance Division.
Good morning, advisory board members.
Good morning.
My name is Jim Renan. I'm Chief Elevator Inspector with the state of Texas. And you should have been supplied a staff report from the Compliance Division. And one of the first items we're going to cover are the personnel changes to the Elevator Division. We added 2 program specialists to our program. The first is Brian Ledbetter, and the second is Carmen Marshall. And both of those are in attendance in the back of the room. If you guys would mind standing up. Thank you. As far as the elevator trade goes, a lot of the contractors have gotten to know Carmen very well, as she does a lot of our plan reviews. And it's helped us immensely because she is a specialist in ADA compliance. So she's done extremely well. Second item we're going to cover is the Elevator Division's public outreach. Myself and my deputy, Jared Bledsoe, have gone out of our way to try to get as much information to the owners, and then work with the fire marshals as far as the elevator code. We have done, going back into 2016, March 22nd, we met with the Austin Fire Department to go over the different types of elevator systems, because that equipment is changing drastically. And the fire department's emergency response and any changes having to do with fire service. On February 14th of 2017, we met with the Houston BOMA, Building Owners and Managers Association, to go over the state's statutes and rules and the owner's responsibilities under those. February 22nd, we did a training seminar with the Texas Fire Alarm Association and discussed the adopted code and its interaction with the Buildings Fire Safety Service, NFPA 72 and NFPA 13, which 72 is the fire code and 13 is your sprinkler code. On May 5th of 2017, we met with EMR Elevator to go over Section 74, 72 of the rules, which is your standards of conduct for licensed inspectors and licensed contractors. August 4th of 2017, we met in Austin with Texas BOMA to go over the responsibilities of building owners under the statute and rules. October 5th of 2017, we met again with with Fort Worth Boma Association to go over statute and rules and the owner's responsibilities. October 6th of 2017, we met with EMR, and just to let you know, EMR had requested us to do this training with all of their field personnel. So we went to Houston, Arlington, and Austin to go over standards of conduct for licensed elevator contractors. Then we have our outreach with our licensed inspectors, and that is totally voluntary according to the rules. So on July 26th, we met in San Antonio to go over the correct procedures with our licensed inspectors. August 23rd of 2016, we met with our inspectors to go over statute, rules, and standards of conduct. August 30th of 2016, we met in Lubbock with our inspectors. That was a long drive. We only have 3 inspectors out there, but it was well worth it. I mean, the guys really enjoyed it. April 28th of 2017, we met Dallas-Fort Worth inspectors to go over statute, rules, and standards of conduct. December 14th, we participated in the inspectors' continuing education, which we have 2 suppliers in the state of Texas. One is QEITF and the other is NASA. And myself or my deputy, we try to make every one of those classes so that if any questions come up regarding the statute of rules, that instructor can have someone who can answer the questions. And that is it for our public. Yeah, Nancy.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Nancy Crumley. When you meet with the fire departments like you did with AFD, this says emergency response. Are you going over emergency rescue?
No. I mean, what our main instruction to them is just on the procedure, did they request for elevator personnel, that being their first? Because the emergency response is totally up. Those people are trained professionals. We do give them a couple of pointers of just on the elevator systems what to look out for, but not how to do it.
Because there's a demand for that. You know, we get requests.
Yeah, and I would say I've got mixed emotions because I'm also a firefighter, but I really don't want to get into telling them how to professionally do their job.
Right.
So we just try to point out the hazards, but the number one message is have you put a call in for elevator personnel, because that can save the tearing up of the equipment and possibly save a life.
Thank you.
Jim, Brian Morris, I also have a question. So on these meetings that you've had in Houston, were any of the Houston elevator, because obviously, because under TDLR, Houston is exempt from our purview or whatever. But so have the Houston people been there to hear in, to listen, and or get educated on, make sure that everybody's on the same page?
Yes. So every meeting that myself or my deputy set up in the Houston city limits, we always invite the chief and the deputy chief of Houston, since they're their own authority.
Right. Are they present?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Right now, we have a very good working relationship with the chief in Houston, Mike Dorsk. And just to let you know, I usually talk to him a couple times a week, and that makes sure that we're on basically the same page.
Okay. Thank you.
So next in our report are the plan reviews, and some of this is lengthy because being that our last meeting was in 2015, so we have figures and totals for 2 years running. The first page is for the fiscal year 2016 on plan reviews, and we broke it down into new installations and alterations. The only thing that I did not put on the report, but I do have the figures for you, we didn't total the numbers. So if you notice, for 2016, The gray bar is for new installations, and the blue bar is for alterations. And for new installations for 2016, there were 1,214 plan reviews submitted that year. Alterations was 464. And that'll be, you'll see some of those totals on the third page that we have on plan reviews. The next page is for the fiscal year 2017, and new installations was 1,294, alterations was 557. And then on the third page for plan review, where your totals are, and we only totaled for all of plan reviews, but I do have the other figures for you. So for the total for 2016 was 1,678, and for 2017 was 1,851. And as you can see, they're progressively going up. So for 2016, for new installations, the total was 1,214. 2017, it was 1,294. And then alterations for 2016 was 464, and 2017 was 557.
Jim?
Yes.
Brian Morris. So what is what's the time period on the plan reviews?
Right now, we're looking at 14 to 15 days turnaround. That's our average. Any of the ones that exceed that is usually a plan review that has been put on hold. It hasn't been rejected, it's been put on hold, and we'll end up calling the licensed contractor. Usually there's some information that's incomplete. So in most cases, the layout drawings that they supplied didn't have the required information.
I know that whenever this was added to the rules, there was some concern about how long it would take to get the plan reviews done. I don't remember, somebody else in the room probably does, since he knows figures. Lawrence, hi. I don't remember how long we had talked about, but I know that there was definitely a concern. So is there, as far as the department, are you comfortable with that 14 days? Is the industry okay with the 14 days?
Yeah, I would say that in a couple of the chiefs that I talk to pretty regularly, and I'm going to just be pulling this out of my head, but if my memory is correct, like the state of Washington is 6 months. California is 2 to 3 months. So a 15-day turnaround I think is extremely well. Now, in saying that, that's the average.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot that will get out under 10, but you got to remember also 3 days, that plan review first arrives at our downtown building and receives its tracking number, it's checked for the money, and that the form is filled out correct, assigned a tracking number, and then put in the inter-office mail. So it might be 2 days before it actually gets over here to our office. So once we receive it, yeah, that's a pretty good turnaround, I think.
So this is Nancy Crumley. I have a question. Is it I remember a few things from accounting class. Is it a FIFO system, first in, first out, or?
Yes, I mean, it's in the order we
It's
receive them.
Order received, okay.
Unless it is an expedited review, that goes right to the top.
Okay.
Because the expedited, we have to have it back to the licensed contractor within 5 business days. And any of the expedited reviews, the licensed contractor has them back in hand the day we receive them. Every time, unless it's incomplete. Any other questions on plan reviews? So your next page is going to show our waiver delays for the fiscal year 2016. The gray bars are for your waivers, and the blue bar is for delays. And for the total, the waivers were 36 for the year, and the delays were 74. The next page is for the fiscal year 2017 waivers delays, and the total for waivers was 22, and the delays were 45. And just to let you in on a little bit of information here, the reason that figure has gone down in 2017 is because of our new category removed from service, because the owner's no longer requesting for delays on their annual inspections.
John McGraw,
Yes, Mr. McGraw.
kind of a sense of what the waiver, what are you still getting for waivers? I guess a lot of us expected that by this time in the process, we'd be down to about zero on our waivers.
Well, most of them are on the new installation of equipment for an MRL, a machine roomless elevator,
Oh, okay,
and they're using the existing hoistway,
okay,
so we do have to waive some of the clearances on that.
I see, okay.
Your next page is on equipment removed from service. And that's going to show you the totals for 2016 fiscal year and 2017 fiscal year. So in 2016, we had 194. 2017, we had 104. And then over the right-hand column shows you the units that have been returned to service that were removed. And that, if you remember, 74.105 of the rules, one of the requirements is if a unit's been removed from service, an annual inspection does bring it back online. The feedback we're getting from the owners, they're very happy with this process.
Yeah.
$20 is a lot cheaper than 10 to 15,000.
Absolutely.
And those figures are going to drastically change. And we'll report on it later on in our report as far as Hurricane Harvey. There are probably, I'm estimating guess, about 40 units right now that I have not received the removed from service inspection report as of yet, but they will be here in the near future from the damaged equipment.
I have a question, Nancy.
Yes.
Crumley. As this tracks on, if a traction elevator was removed from service and 7 years later put back in service, it only requires an annual at that point, or will it require a 5-year load test?
Well, it will require just an annual, inspection,
Just
yes.
an annual?
Yeah, based on the numbers, when was its last 5 years? So,
True,
yeah,
right.
if it's been out 7 years, it would require a 5-year. Yes, you are
Okay.
correct.
Okay. All right.
The next page is our reported incidents for the fiscal year 2016 and 2017. So the first bar shows that we had 13 reported incidences on elevators. One of them was an accident. So there's a lot of confusion, and myself and my deputy have been trying to school the owners on that. The rules state that an incident must be reported to TDLR if serious bodily injury occurred on the incident. We actually get reports on just about everything that happens on the equipment. So that's why we broke it down, showing you what the actual accidents were. I can tell you that one on elevators was right here in Austin. It was on a traction elevator. It was due to equipment malfunction, but there were extenuating circumstances in that. A woman that worked in the building got hurt, but nothing was ever reported to the building. We were notified about a month and a half after the accident took place. Myself and my deputy went to the building. We got with the licensed contractor. We got with the building people. So the facts to support were non-existent. The person that said they got hurt was never asked for medical attention, but left the building and then went and sought attention on their own. In fact, the building manager had no no documentation of this accident happening. So we spent 2 days down at the building on this traction elevator trying to get it, because the report was that it was not level at the first floor, and we could never get the equipment to malfunction. On escalators, that's where 99.9% of our incident reports come from. There were 2 accidents. And I'm gonna go into 217 so I can report the accidents on the escalators all at once. So in 2017, we had 38 incident reports with 3 accidents. So that gives us a total of 5 accidents on the escalators. All of those happened in department stores throughout the state. And they all involved children. And all of them involved unattended children. The one in 2016 was an amputation of an index finger. And a 3-year-old boy actually stuck his finger in the cone plate while the unit was running. And so, we'll do a complete investigation on that. We have had to file a couple of cases against the owners where the equipment wasn't shut off, and we need the equipment shut off and left shut off so that the accident scene is preserved until we can get out there to do a complete investigation. The 3 were feet caught between the steps and the skirts, and in 90% of those cases, the person that had the incident had flip-flops on, and it was a child. And then the last accident, which happened in 2017, was a child who was unattended and stuck his hand in the handrail inlet. And that wasn't serious, but it was still an accident. So, as you can see, escalators are a primary looked at equipment, and what our policy is, as far as the inspectors, it is basically any violation on an escalator has to be corrected before it is put back in service. There are a few that are not required, but you're talking basically key switches, light bulbs, but almost every other violation could endanger the public, so they're corrected on site. Any questions on that?
Scott Anderson.
Yes, Scott.
So from your accidents, there were 3 sidestep entrapments.
Yes, sir.
And on those, were there safety brushes involved on any of those escalators?
Yes, sir.
Had they all met the performance standards on their tests?
The step indexing,
Yeah, the
yes.
steps, so they had all met that, so they were, up to snuff, but they still happen.
Right, so what our policy is, if an accident occurs, so we break it down, an incident is reported to TDLR, and then TDLR determines if it's an accident, which is serious bodily injury. We even go a little bit lighter than that. If medical attention is required, we consider it an accident. Then we'll dispatch either myself or my deputy to the site, do an investigation. We require a full inspection, and that includes the step indexing. And we'll try to be present for that. Not everyone can we because of the time factor. On none of those cases was there any failures. And as long as it meets, and we determine that it was user misuse and not equipment malfunction, we allow, once it passes its re-inspection, for the owners to put the equipment back in service.
Nancy
Ms.
Crumley, he took one of my questions, but the other one is, could you give us an example of an incident versus an accident?
Yeah, these are probably 99%, 99.9% of all the reports is DFW Airport, elderly person riding escalator in the up direction, had his luggage sitting on the step next to him, lost his balance, and fell. And that's not due to equipment malfunction. Our safety signs are clear, pay attention, hold the handrail, and ride the unit. And in most cases where somebody trips and falls, they're not holding the handrail, they're usually either texting or looking at their cell phone.
Okay, thanks.
This is Lawrence Taylor.
Yep.
Did we have any incidents where a drunken traveler fell down, passed out on the moving walks like they had in the past and kept bumping into the comb at the end?
I haven't seen that one since I've been here, but that's not to say it's not going to happen. Any other questions? So the next page covers new technology variances, and in fiscal year 2017, we had two. Our first one, 1701, was on the variable speed escalators and moving walks, and that was kind of an easy one. As you know, the state of Texas is on a 17.1 2007 edition of the code. Variable speed escalators are in the newer editions of the code. So the language is already there for the requirements that the contractor can supply us in the NTV. And I believe that's definitely the way to go. Anything to say, if we can save some energy, as long as they have the safety sensors on there, I think we're good. The NTV 17-02 is to use a smaller size governor rope. So in the 2007 code, the existing requirement, the smallest size they can go is 9.5 millimeter. But in the newer 13 and 16, they're allowed to use 6 millimeter. And that's all due to advancements in the technology of the wire ropes. Any questions? All right, our last page is on Hurricane Harvey figures, and we'll also might be talking about a little about this in when we get to section H. But so what we have is for 2017, September, October, November, and December totals, we had 38 alteration plan reviews where the contractor paid the regular plan review price of $200, but those 38 plan reviews were expedited. And then below it is the equipment removed from service. And for September through December, there are 12 removed from service inspection reports. And the way we're handling those is if it's equipment that's been affected by Hurricane Harvey, those reports come directly to my office. And then one of our program specialists enters it into the database. That way, we're waiving the $20 registration fee for those removed from service inspection reports. And like I said, that figure is going to drastically increase. I would take a guess to say by June, because what the delay is a lot of buildings are waiting either to insurance money or for their new fiscal year to start, where they roll over on a new budget where they can allot that money to repair the elevators. So by June, I would say that 12 is going to be up around 100 at least. And that concludes my report unless there are any questions.
Jim, this is Lawrence Taylor. Do you have any idea, I noticed you've got 38 plan reviews, but that's obviously not the total number of elevators. You got a good feel for how many pieces of equipment were actually damaged in your jurisdiction?
And I'm going to use the chief of Houston, because that's who I get the reports from, because that's where most of the equipment is. We're talking, I'm going to take a rough guess, like up to 1,000. There is a building in the city limits of Houston and we probably won't see that plan review for another year, because when Hurricane Harvey came in, it's got a basement. It flooded the basement of the building, and the building has its own sewage treatment plant. So that overflowed. So that whole lower floor and the first floor has to be abated before they can even start removal of the existing elevator equipment. And we're talking extensive.
This is Lawrence again, but you're not getting plan reviews for stuff in the city limits of
No,
Houston.
not in Houston. I'm just using that as figures. But the outlying areas tie into that. That's under our jurisdiction. I'm trying to think of, you'll know it, the city where our Inspector Jim McCarty lives. Rockport.
Rockport.
Yes. Lot of damaged equipment there. You know, and the only way I pick up the information is through phone calls with owners asking for advice on which route to go. Most of those conversations have dealt with instructing them to remove from service their equipment because their annual inspections come and due. So that's another good point of how that process is working effectively. Because for $20, they can remove it from service, and it's no longer required that they have their annual inspection at that point.
Sorry. Jared Bledsoe, Deputy Chief Elevator Inspector. I know just from the city in the city of San Antonio alone, there has been over 25 that we've already received plan reviews for related to the 25 elevators, units, I should say units, related to the Hurricane Harvey.
And I should have directed you to Jared when you asked that question, Mr. Taylor, because his responsibility is plan reviews, and then Carmen Marshall actually does the reviews. So.
Yeah, this is Lawrence again. I was just trying, I would have, in the back of my mind, you know, from watching TV and seeing the stuff, I would have expected it to be into multiple hundreds just in your jurisdiction alone.
And I think the delay on that is because I've talked to a couple of building owners, let's say, whose annual inspection was done right before the hurricane hit. So they basically have a year before they have to move on anything because their annual inspection's not done. So, and like I said, a lot of them are waiting on insurance monies before they sign a contract with a licensed contractor. And until they sign that contract, we're not going to get a plan review.
And so this is Lawrence again. So this is going to impact your division and your workload for some time to come.
I look for us probably plan reviews to go up about 25% for the next year and a half. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next staff report would be the Executive Office.
Mr. Chairman and board members, I'm Nick Foinas of TDLR, and want to wish you a Happy New Year, and thank you for being here today, and thank you for your service to your profession and to the state of Texas. Here to bring you an Executive Office report, a brief summary of what's been happening around the agency. 2017 was a busy year for the agency and a big year. It started off with the 85th session of the Texas Legislature, and we followed that with a special session this summer, or last summer. Since then, TDLR staff's been busy implementing legislation that was passed over the last two regular sessions, and the process continues as all of our divisions are involved in developing and reviewing rules, communicating to stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. Majority of the work has been completed, but this is a process that will continue as we implement programs this year and next. As Jim explained, last fall our staff was busy doing what we could to help our licensees and small businesses along the Texas Gulf Coast recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. We worked with the governor's office and Governor Abbott's Rebuild Texas efforts, and we're successful in implementing procedures to help all eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover as quickly as possible. Much of our focus now is on the rebuild by protecting small business consumers avoid unlicensed activity and ensuring that their receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. Information on all this can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and the governor's Rebuild Texas site. Also want to mention that yesterday the governor extended the emergency declaration for another 30 days. 2018 is a non-legislative year, therefore it's when we take on our statute-driven strategic planning exercise to prepare the agency and our programs for the next legislative session in 2019. We'll be going through that process again this spring, so you'll be hearing more about that real soon. I want to go back to our website for a minute. We refer to it as our window to the world. It's our chief communications tool to reach our stakeholders and the public, and wanted to share some recent traffic numbers associated with this program. Over the past 6 months, the elevator and escalator safety website had more than 20,000 page views, or an average of 110 per day. How are these visitors accessing your site? Well, a vast majority of them, 73%, do so from a desktop computer, while 24% from a smartphone and 3% from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting your site: number one, laws and rules, followed by frequently asked questions, forums, new technology variances, and advisory board information. Also wanted to let you know that we're always looking at our websites, working to improve them and to make them fresh, informative, more user-friendly as they possibly can be. So please pass along any feedback you may have, and we'd appreciate that. Also, like the chairman, if you're interested in our on social media, please follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Keep up with TDLR activities and news. And if there are any questions, be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that would include the staff report part of the agenda. Next item on the agenda is discuss possible recommendation regarding proposed rule amendments to 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 74, 74.50, and 74.60 to implement 1960 audit recommendation to update the rules to reflect what is currently in practice regarding certificate information and to correct an outdated reference.
Mr. Chairman, board members, for the record, Charles Johnson, Assistant General Counsel. This is an exercise, a continuation of the training session. We talked about the APA and the rulemaking process. This is the beginning of the rulemaking process. We talked about the sources of rulemaking. Well, this proposed rule came from two different sources. One is a staff review of the rules, recognizing that there was a reference that was incorrect. And so in 7450, A3, there's a correction to the reference, and this reference goes to the requirements for correcting violations in order to get a certificate issued. It now points to the correct section of the rules that brings the elevator in compliance and allows us to issue a certificate. The second amendment is in 7460, and you see in the agenda there's reference to an audit report. What had happened is that the auditor audits various programs, and as the audit was taking place with this program, a discrepancy was recognized between what the rule actually said. You'll see the rule required on that certificate of compliance show the inspector's name, but the name was not on the actual certificate. So there was a discrepancy between the rule and the practice. And so the decision was made to leave the certificate as is and just to take the inspector's name out of the rule, which is, if you got the inspector's number, you've got his name, so it's kind of one and the same. And so we're recommending that the rule be published with these two corrections, and happy to answer any questions you may have about the two proposed amendments. Then I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, Brian Morris.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I believe, I'm not very good at outlines, but I believe that you're missing an A. It should be, I think you're referencing 74.66A6, A through C.
We will verify that reference, and yes, sir.
Yeah.
Not to doubt your word, but if there's any corrections to that reference, we'll make that change. With your approval?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the proposed changes.
Do I have a second?
John McGraw, second.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed?
And I assume that that approval includes a verification of this cross-reference.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it- Thank you. Where'd my agenda go? All right, agenda item H, discussion and possible referral to work group for adoption of the ASME A17.1 2016 elevator code with possible changes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mary Winston. I heard a first, a second. We took a vote, it was a majority vote. We just have to get it for the minutes.
Yeah.
So, yes.
There was a majority vote.
Yes. All ayes.
Good morning once again. Jim Renan, Chief Elevator Inspector with the State of Texas. So, to let you know what has brought this up to and on the agenda is the code has been modified extensively starting in 2013, and once again, Texas is under A 17.1 2007 edition. Ever since 9/11, there is a new way of looking at the elevators in high-rise installations, and what the safety committees have deemed is that the elevators should be used for occupant extrication of the building in an emergency. That's completely different from the way we do it now. As you notice, most buildings you go into, it will say in case of emergency, use stairs. And you're not to use the elevators at all. What they've determined is in the World Trade Center disaster that if the elevators would have been fully operational, a lot more people would have made it out of the collapse of those Twin Towers. So that language brought up two new systems. One is fire access elevators, and all of those requirements are out of the latest edition of the building code. And then the other is occupant evacuation operation. And that has a lot of requirements in the 2016 code. So under our current code, the 2007 edition, if we have a high-rise installation being installed that wants to use occupant evacuation elevators, we have no requirements that our inspectors can cite on this elevator system because it doesn't exist in the 2007 code. Just to give you a little bit of the history, what the building code says is that if you go over 420 feet, you have to have an extra egress staircase in that building. And to offset the cost of that, you can not install that extra staircase if your elevators comply with occupant evacuation operation. And what that does is picture a 60-story building. You're going to have fire access elevators, which usually are these service elevators, because one of the requirements is that they have to have access to every floor in the building. This is an astronomical cost factor to building a building now, because those two fire access elevators have to be in their own separate lobby, have to be in their own separate machine room. They have to, from the lobbies, they have to have access to an egress staircase. The fire service operation works basically the same as we have right now. The good point is on these two systems, the sprinklers go. So, and that's another new way of thinking North Texas has already voted on that a couple of years back. Sprinklers are being removed from the elevator areas of the building, which is a great idea in my opinion. It saves the owner a little bit of cost because now you no longer need to do shunt disconnect, which is a requirement that prior to the application of the sprinklers, you have to kill the power to the elevator so that there's not dangerous operation. Occupant evacuation, and I'll give you a quick summary. So if any smoke or heat sensor goes off in the building, and let's say we have a 50-story tower, and a smoke sensor goes off on the 25th floor, and let's say we have 6 elevators, and they're all wired for occupant evacuation, those elevators are going to go up, and they're going to go 2 floors above 25 and 2 floors below, and stay fully operational, but only serve that bank of 5 floors to get those people out of the building. They'll take them down to 1. Everybody else in the building will have to use the stairs to evacuate because the emergency is only in that section of the building. If a second smoke sensor was to go off in, we'll say, floor 30, now that 5 floors is going to spread out. And it's going to go 2 above 30 and 2 below 25. And that's what it keeps doing. It keeps spreading out. It's a very involved system because what you're gonna see in the buildings that will you'll know something's different right away. Right now, you walk into any building where the elevators have fire service operation, and there is a key switch in the lobby. Now there's going to be one of those key switches for each individual elevator, and that's so that when the firefighters get there, if they need extra elevators other than the fire access elevators, they can automatically key those elevators down to the first floor and take control of them. It's very involved. The occupant evacuation elevators have to have digital screens on each floor telling evacuating tenants how long they have to wait for an elevator. It will also have messages in there on the affected floors to use the elevators for evacuation. And they also have to have a voice system for every floor with a pre-recorded message while this emergency's going on. So it's very involved. And like I said, we realized this back when the 216 first came out. Thank God I haven't had any true OEO systems installed yet, because my inspectors would almost need to turn a blind eye to it, because we have no requirements in the existing code to cite any violations. So what I did was, when we realized we were going down this path, I met with our former chief, Mr. Taylor, and Mike Dorsk, of the chief of Houston, and my deputy, and we sat down and spent some extensive time and put the 2007 code next to the 2016 and started listing all the changes. So what you're going to see is, if we could get the advisory board to give us an approval to go this route, you're going to see the same sections deleted right now that we delete out of the 2007 code, with a few other nominal changes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just for the record, the request for direction is to appoint the work group, not to adopt the section that's under discussion.
Correct. So there are a lot of pluses in the newer code also. 8.6, which is your written maintenance control program, has been greatly extended, which I think is a great benefit to the owner. that's really about it, unless anybody has any questions or comments.
This is
Yes,
Nancy
Ms.
Crumley. I have a question. So what you're proposing is to keep the 2017 code as is currently adopted and add sections of 2016 to what is
No,
currently being used?
Mr. Chairman, again,
No?
not to interfere, but just to keep the record clear, it's not a recommendation to adopt any particular section, but just to appoint the work group to talk about the changes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Lawrence Taylor. I personally don't see any necessities to expend the board's efforts in work groups in this matter. All of the changes should, even if a work group got together and spent the time doing it, the changes from the 2007 code to the 2016 code there are no negatives that any of the four of us, when we sat down and looked it over multiple discussions, there are no negative changes that negatively impact owners or elevator companies or the agency for that matter. What it does right now, as Mr. Murnan correctly pointed out, is if one of these were to take place here, there's nothing that this agency could do should there be a violation. There has been conflicts between the adopted building codes in all the jurisdictions in Texas, not all, but the vast majority of them. Ever since they've started adopting codes, the first firefighter service access elevators appeared in the 2009 IBC. And then OEO came in the 2012 IBC. All of the North Texas Central Council of Governments, all 238 jurisdictions up there, have adopted the 2015, I think, except for Fort Worth. San Antonio's on 2015. Austin is still on the 12, but it's going there. And this creates an untenable position for this agency to be in, is to have the ability of the building owner to comply with their own locally adopted building codes, but yet no authority for them to cite elevator code violations, because that's completely reserved for this agency, and this agency being powerless to do anything about it. And so I would move that we not have a work group, but to begin the process of adopting the 2016 codes amended, as Mr. Murnan has pointed out. This situation of having a conflict between the building codes, and there are, if I remember correctly, and even though I'm a numbers guy, I'm not sure this number's right, there are 1,154 jurisdictions in the state. And there's the possibility of 1,154 different adoptions of an IBC with their own local amendments, because there is no uniform statewide building code here except for the energy code. So you're putting the agency and people in a position where they cannot take advantage of all of this stuff because there's no code to cite.
Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, clarification, I think there's a difference between having a discussion about the implications of this code, but there are no conclusions drawn one way or the other about the agency's jurisdiction and powers to enforce any of those requirements. And the purpose of the work group would be to have these discussions to bring you back a more informed discussion about the implications. And I'm not taking issue with any position that Mr. Taylor has taken or conclusions that he's drawn, but I think the work group would be representative of the board as a whole to bring you back an analysis of the differences or lack of differences between the two codes. But the issue about jurisdiction or legal issues, I think, that have not yet been discussed, and I just want the record to reflect that we reserve the right to make those determinations as the need arises.
Absolutely, and this is Lawrence again. What I see is that this work group will do nothing but delay the implementation of codes that are required by those building codes already. Every building code is in violation if they go down this route, and they're doing it now. So the work group, and I would poll my board members now if that's an appropriate thing to do, is why waste 2, 3, 4, 5 months, however long this is going to take with a work group, if the board agrees now that this is important, my motion would be to avoid the work groups, period, and proceed with the adoption of that code by whatever is the correct method to do it.
Can I interrupt? I know I'm in between like two men doing this, so I'm just gonna pop in right here. Mr. Taylor, this is the process that we're going towards. I don't think there doesn't appear to be any disagreement. Oh, Mary Winston, TDLR. Any disagreement about this issue. There is an issue. The process to move forward, as it's stated on this agenda, discussion and possible referral to work group. Ms. Crumley just stated, how would we do this? Would we add an extra section here? Would we do this or that? That's what the work group would tackle. The best way to present this into the full picture of what we already have going on and what we know needs to happen in the future very quickly. Okay, we don't have to wait 3, 4, 5 months. If the work group is going to meet, going to discuss how are we going to do this? We can say, let's adopt it. We don't have anything to adopt. We can adopt, how will we integrate it? The work group will discuss how will we integrate it. Now, whatever this advisory board does and what the work group does, we come back for another meeting. It has to go to the commission anyway. So the quicker the work group meets and gets this together, the quicker it can go to let the full body discuss it, to let all the YouTubers out there see what's going on in your profession, and get it to the commission. So the onus is on this board, through the work group, through when the next meeting will be called, to push this forward to the commission for adoption. That's government bureaucracy, if you will, but it's what we have, and we'll move as quickly through that system as we can.
Well, again, this is Lawrence, then I would say the agenda item is misleading when it says the possible making of a work group. If the board feels that a work group isn't necessary, that's the decision of the board, not the agency, I would say.
And Mr. Taylor, with all due respect, then let's hand this over to Mr. Morris as the presiding officer of this board,
Yes.
and let the board go there.
Yeah, okay, I agree. Thank you, Lawrence. I'm Brian Morris. I guess maybe some information, if I have this timeline correct, for maybe some of the new board members or the process. So yeah, so work group is a group that's a non-quorum, so it would have to be less than the number of people to a quorum. They would meet either here or telephonically with staff, go through the process, come up with a recommendation, then that would go to another meeting here. Then that would be discussed, or maybe a possible another meeting, and then ultimately a recommendation to the commission.
Mr. Morris, I'm going to hop in again. Work group, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The findings of that work group would come back to the full board.
Correct.
You can pick at that time to adopt the work of the work group. Then, if the work has been done here, the drafting has been done here, if the incorporation, as Ms. Crumley has stated, has been done, it can then go to the commission for adoption. The groundwork starts here. We don't have to have a couple to 3 meetings. It depends on when this work group meets, how much work we get done. How do we incorporate this ASME into and make something more current? It can come before that next board meeting. The board can adopt it and move to the commission to make it fine.
To add to that discussion, there's going to be a need for another meeting of this board within the next 60 to 90 days in order to take up the rule that you just recommended be published. And so there's going to be a need, a short-term need for another meeting. This could be added to that meeting as far as the work group's report.
Okay. All right, so I guess, again, I would like to take a straw poll of the board. Obviously, staff is very educated, very knowledgeable about the codes and standards. In the past, they have actually done the work themselves, brought us, as a board meeting, have brought us a draft or a recommendation. So I don't know if staff is actually asking the help or they need the expertise of the advisory board for that, or they're just giving us the opportunity and being nice and let us be involved in a work group. So I'd like to take a poll of the board of whether you think a work group is necessary to help advise or staff prepare the a recommendation.
And Mr. Chairman, by
Mr.
poll, are you asking for a motion? Because, I mean, that would be the,
Well,
Just discussion.
discussion.
And Mr. Matheny is.
Jerry Matheny. You keep talking about the work group, but how does the work group come about? Who's on it and who puts all the people on it and where do they come from? I'd like the discussion on the work group itself.
Of course. And Jerry, we do that. So a work group has to be less than a quorum, and we'll take volunteers. So whatever work group, we'll name the work group. We'll say who wants to volunteer to be on that group. Anybody that wants to be on it that has expertise or a need or some input, volunteer to be on the board in that work group. And then a time and place would be determined of where the work group would meet. TDLR staff would definitely be involved with, or would actually run that work group meeting.
And Mr.
if I-
Matheny, Mr. Morris, I'm sorry, Charles. Mr. Morris ultimately chooses the work group, takes volunteers, but he will make that final decision on who the work group is.
and I was going to add that the work group is composed of the board members. It'll be.
See, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be board members less than a quorum.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
But we're not doing that independently. We don't meet amongst ourselves as a work group. We're meeting with TDLR staff.
John McGraw, I concur with Lawrence. And your concept of staff should bring us a draft ready to adopt. And I don't see the value. I don't see the value in the work group. I just really don't.
And I obviously concur with myself.
Okay, so then, any other discussion on that?
Sure.
I just have one more question about the 2016. And the number of jurisdictions throughout the country, including New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, that has 420 above. How many are contemplating, in your opinion, or do you know? Because the building code doesn't drive that most of the time, and I'm listening to what you're saying down there, but how many people are looking to adopt 2016 because of the fire recall? Because that's what you've talked about today, and it's a full body of code, but you're just talking about the fire recall to meet building code for people that have adopted code in the state. I'm listening.
This is Lawrence here. First off, I'd like to state that Chapter 754 prohibits this agency from doing what Nancy said.
I'm sorry. The discussion is really drifting off of the agenda item. The agenda item is the appointment of a work group. You're diving deep into the details of pros and cons of the work group would actually be doing.
That seems to me to be a legitimate discussion about when you're talking about having a work group. That ought to be the kind of thing you talk about. Why have one, and is it justified or not?
Yeah, Charles, I think, we want to explore a little bit of the pros and cons to ultimately, somebody's going to make a motion whether we do a work group or not.
Yes, sir. But my point, though, is that there comes a point where the discussion drifts so far into the details that you have gotten off of the main agenda item, which is the appointment of the work group. And that's a very sensitive subject on this side of the room, how far the discussion drifts. And I think it's drifting deep into the details that raise questions about whether or not you've gone beyond the agenda item, which is the appointment of the work group.
Well, I have Brian Morris, I have a question. So if we're, obviously, the 2007 code is, what's the math? So many years beyond 2016. A lot of the new technology variances are being required because we're on the 2007 code.
Correct.
So with an adoption of a newer code, I would assume for a time period, that would eliminate any requirements for people to request new technology variances.
Yes, Jim Renan, Chief Elevator Inspector. One of the NTV's new technology variances we reported in our staff report, 17-01 for variable speed escalators, is already an approved requirement in the 216 code, so there would not need to be a new technology variance on variable speed escalators like we have right now.
Because I think when we created the new technology variance, that was somewhat of a stopgap measure so that we could analyze and explore new technologies as people ask it, because technology was moving faster than the code that we had added on.
That is correct, and it's also a requirement in the scope at the beginning of the code that the AHJ will come up with implementation of a process not to stifle new technology.
Nancy Crumley, you mentioned that a group sat down and compared the two codes, 2007, 2016.
Correct.
And came up with a list of the differences. Is that list available to us?
I can make that list available, yes.
Scott Anderson, I'd like to make a motion with what I've heard from Lawrence. I'd like to make a motion that we do not have a study group, and that our next meeting, or as quickly as we can, we have the new code brought forward for us to review with public comment, whatever, so that if there are pros and cons, we'll get it at that point. But at this point, I'd like to move this along as quickly as possible towards adoption. And I do believe that if we have a work group, that would only slow down the adoption. So I would move to not have a work group.
And this is Lawrence, and I would second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion, so I guess easier for staff. Whoever's in favor of the motion, please raise your hand.
Just me.
Who's opposed? Okay, there's two oppositions. All right.
Mary Winston, I just want to make sure we get it for the minutes. Delia, did you get the vote? Okay.
So there is two members are against forming the work group, so majority.
Two or four for
Two or four. Yeah, that's why I hesitated. Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, two members were for forming the work group, two were opposed to it.
Mary Winston, TDLR, you guys are easy, I have to tell you. You're just handing it to staff. That shows trust. That's what David just said. It shows trust, and we do appreciate that. Jim, David, y'all are up. You know this. We have Charles, who's retiring soon. He hasn't shared that with you. But we have, he doesn't care one way or another. He'll be gone. But no, he cares. He uses elevators. So, we will have another Assistant General Counsel. Staff will take it from here. We've said in a public format that you guys trust us, and we can, well, for the most part. So, and we can proceed.
Jim Renan, Chief Elevator. Just so I have the advisory board's understanding, so the code is copyrighted material, so I can't make every board member a copy of the code. But what I will prepare, and I just want to make sure it's okay with you people, I will make a list of the changes between the 2007 and the 2016, and what also show the existing language from the 2007 and what we're changing to. And then a second set of sheets of all the deletions.
Actually, we're gonna give even more than that. Charles is gonna jump in here because we have to give them more.
Yeah, I think that the packet of material that Jim's making reference to should be a part of the material provided in the material for the next board meeting.
I agree.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Because he made reference earlier that he would provide it to the members. I didn't know what he meant before the meeting, in response to the question, or as a part of the material for the next meeting.
John McGraw here. I would, speaking for myself, I'd rather have it sooner than later.
Right.
Well, that's the point, is that the meeting has not yet been set, so the material cannot go out. Remember we talked about sharing documents and so forth with the full board? That's what would happen here. So I think the better approach would be to schedule a meeting and send the material out early as a part of that meeting, rather than send documents to members without a meeting and being a part of the formal process.
And this is Lawrence. I know this may surprise you, but I agree.
Well, Lawrence, you and I have agreed several times over the years.
On one hand.
I'd like, this is Lawrence again, I would like to reemphasize what Ms. Winson has said. Is speaking for myself, I have an immense amount of trust that the agency can do this more effectively, more efficiently, and we can only have to do it once, and we can be done with this, rather than throwing multiple speed bumps in a process that is, I think, urgent. So
And we're not
I'm-
going to say that other advisory boards who want to have the work groups, they are not being speed bumps. They're just wanting to have that hands-on part of the process. But in this case, Lawrence, you've worked here before. You know these people, you know what they can do, you have that confidence, and David's nodded the whole time, and whoever takes Charles's place, which that would be Molly Fudell at her, she has her card here, but she's at a conference. So, sounds great.
Again, Brian Morris, I guess as our history, my history is that for planning purposes, I think this next meeting would be, lengthy. I don't know if it's anticipated to possibly be a 4-hour, 6-hour meeting, but obviously it's a big step that we're going to go through. So I think just planning purposes, it's going to be a little bit extended more than normal.
Jim Renan, Chief Elevator Inspector. Mr. Morris, I think when you schedule the next meeting, you should leave yourself adequate time so that any questions and explanations over the changes that arise will have ample time to explain it so everybody is in full knowledge.
Right. Understood. Also, I guess in discussion of work group, I know this is probably off agenda, but in reviewing the meeting minutes from the last meeting, the staff was going to form, or we decided to do a work group to go over elevator program and forms. And Lawrence, Nance, and I were on that work group, and staff never got us together for that.
For
So
the
since it's
record,
not on the agenda.
Yeah, well, and actually, I'm about to address that. I think that this is a part of the last meeting, so there were minutes of that last meeting, and I don't believe this was a part of those minutes, so I think that we need to make the correction to the minutes that this was discussed in the last board meeting. And if you will hold that discussion as to what happened till we get to the part of the meeting where we set the next agenda, we can have that discussion.
Okay.
This is Lawrence here. There wasn't a quorum present at the last meeting, was there?
Well, no, this was from the December 15th meeting, 2016. Yeah.
I don't remember that far
Okay,
back.
so we beat up item H. So we're going to move on to item I, discussion of safety concerns and possible items for strategic planning consideration.
To touch on this agenda item, we have certain items, information, statutory. We cannot change the statute that comes down from the legislature. We cannot make rules that have no statutory basis. This item contains, agenda item I contains items that relate to statutory requirements we cannot change. So what do we do when we have statutory things that an advisory board can't touch because we don't have a law to support something that someone has mentioned that they may or may not want to rule on? What we can do as an agency is we can make this a part of our strategic planning. When we go and travel, Nick discussed this in the executive report. The next session is in 2019. So in 2018, we go to different cities and we ask our different professions to come and we ask them to provide information on items they would like to see that would come to fruition in a law. We take that, we make it part of our strategic plan, and we present that to the legislature. They can either accept those, reject those, but that's how we bring forth as an agency these items that the professions would like to address or maybe make a law pertaining to that. So we listed these here, and we can list other things we want to put forth, if Charles doesn't stop me, in a strategic plan. But this is just listed as some concerns that we would go forth with our strategic planning process as TDLR goes on the road and asks for your profession, all the professions that we regulate, to come into these different sessions. We publicize it, and we take all public comment on what they want to see happen with these items and other items, but we can't move forward currently. We just have to work this through our strategic plan and see what the ledge says.
Okay.
Any more discussion, Ms. Winston? David Gonzalez, TDR. So for transparent, this is David Gonzalez with TDLR. For transparency, I think we have some new board members that had requested items to be on the agenda. We have placed them on the agenda as an opportunity to at least bring them up. I think Ms. Winston was...
I'm sorry, David, you're moving to item J?
No,
You're
still
on
on,
I?
still on I.
Okay.
And just want to make sure you understand, Mr. Matheny, that Ms. Winston was trying to address this and hold. This advisory board cannot necessarily discuss legislative changes or items that require input from a representative or senator proposing laws. As part of our agenda, we've got it on here because we wanted to honor, you're new to the group, you just had your training, and you had a list of items. There may be more items that you want to put on a list for strategic planning. I'm just not sure that the advisory board is the place for the discussion items that you had on your list. So I want to make sure that you know that this is pretty much your agenda item to look at, but I'm thinking it may be more appropriate during our strategic planning sessions that we do plan to have in the spring, because that would allow us to take input from everybody and even make the list a little bit longer.
I agree. But when someone asked me what I would like to do and talk about and so on and so forth, I gave you my recommendations. And I'll show up for any meeting and talk about the things that I like to talk about, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You got to speak up when you're given the opportunity. You did exactly that, so I appreciate that input. And I think with that, we can move on to item J. Chair.
Oh, wait, slow down. Okay, I'm a layman here. I'm totally confused. Everybody's talking, in my mind, everybody's talking around each other. Okay. So I'm confused. Is there an issue that the possibly want to incorporate through legislation to license elevator journeymen? Is that what the objective is?
Mary Winston, this is an issue that Mr. Matheny brought up. As he said, he's gonna, if we go to San Antonio or wherever we are, we expect to see you there. And I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Because, so this is, and these are issues that were brought up, and we're making sure we address them, but we're also just making it a statement publicly that we're addressing them as much as we can, which is very limited. But how can we handle something that so far is not legislatively there? We take it into the strategic planning process. And that's really all we're saying. So since he requested it, it's on the agenda, but it's on the agenda in a proper format that it would be moved forward during strategic planning, because this body cannot move forward at this time.
Okay, Brian Moore. So it's a little, if it's an early vetting process, feeling out
Let me take
the public?
If I may take a run at it, Mr. Chairman. It's on the agenda as an accommodation and a courtesy to the new board member to explain the process for getting these issues in front of the commission through the strat planning process. So it's more informational than anything else.
It sounds like me, it's the beginning of the beginning.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not the beginning of the beginning because legally this body and the agency cannot discuss legislation. It's more of an informational item to let you know the correct route to take for this issue is through the strat planning process.
I understand. I mean, so you're floating out a balloon to talk about elevator journeyman licensing. floating out of a balloon about third-party inspections?
No, sir.
Of what?
No, sir. We're not floating anything. It's
on the
info-
agenda
it's
to
it's
include in the-
informative. It's on the agenda to advise the newest board member that these issues are legislative in nature and will be can be discussed through the strat planning process and not the advisory board body. It's more informational than it is an action item.
Okay.
And I'm trying to be as direct as possible with the correct decorum, but it's more informational because this body can take no action on it.
Any other comments from the board?
Let's go to item J.
I second that. This is
All right.
Lawrence.
Item J, recommendations for agenda items for next board meeting.
And Mr. Chairman, I think this is an item that you can bring up the issue about the December board meeting, and I assume that you would want those work groups for the follow-up to that agenda item to take place and be placed on the next agenda.
No, I don't know. I don't know if there still is a problem or an issue. There was, I believe, and Nancy, if you can, or Lawrence, that there was some little bit of discussion about cleaning up the forms and whatnot.
David Gonzalez with TDLR. Mr. Morris, Chair, you're absolutely right. We did the work we needed to do immediately to take care of the remove from service. That was an immediate action had to take care of. We actually have quite a few other forms, and we've actually got an agency-wide effort to try to standardize forms and make them better. One of our licensing staff who's worked really hard on those forms has them awaiting, but I have not called a separate second meeting of that work group. As long as y'all are still intact and willing to participate, we can still get back together. It's tweaking. It's making things nice and hopefully more helpful for the public to utilize our forms, and we can have that, if it's okay, a report for the second work group meeting, a continuation to address those forms.
And that will be placed on the next agenda.
Well, no. So I mean, so we have a different group of board members. I think we're going to go back and reassign the members of that work group.
Okay.
No, sir.
'Cause that was done, well over a year ago.
We can't appoint a new work group.
I'm not saying to appoint a new work group. We're going to reappoint the members of this work group.
Well, actually, rather than reappoint, I think reconstitute.
Sure.
Because they've already been appointed. We just need to call them up and schedule a meeting. I'm really dancing around the Open Meetings Act to get the issue addressed through the minutes for that prior meeting. And so the discussion is to pull those members forward without reappointing them because they're not on the agenda for reappointment.
Mr. Chairman, while you're thinking of that, can I ask Mr. Gonzalez a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. David did not, and Nancy and I were just discussing this. As I recall, I received a good number of emails that said, these are some forms, here are the changes we would like to make, what are your recommendations? And I responded, and I believe Nancy did as well.
You're right. Okay, I apologize. You're right.
So I believe that
Yes.
the work of that work group is done.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You are, David Gonzalez, TDR, you are correct. We did forward y'all forms, and y'all commented on all the ones we forwarded to you. That is not all of the forms that we have in the licensing elevator section, but it took care of the immediate items that were most pressing. This other work that it's not as pressing, and it is something that we're looking at agency-wide, we could look to a separate meeting to appoint some of the new members, if they're interested in participating, to get that work done. It doesn't have to be reconstituted. It could, if y'all chose to do that as well, because that would keep it simpler and on track, but it's not a requirement. We could do either one of those scenarios works out, because we're no longer in the pressing, we got to get it done. Like I said, Bruce has done his work. He's got his forms ready for somebody to look at, whether it's the previous group reconstituted or a new group that can participate and have fun with forms.
Again, I appreciate the correction. Yeah, I do recall now that there was a pressing need, and we did do that. Rather quickly. So I think the intent of that original work group was satisfied.
So to bring the discussion back to the agenda item, is there a need to place this on the next agenda, on the next meeting?
This is Lawrence. I don't believe so.
Okay, so I apologize for the confusion.
What was her name again? This is Lawrence here. One item I would obviously like to see on the next agenda is a review of the agency's proposals for the adoption of the latest and greatest elevator code.
Yep.
It's done.
Okay. Any other agenda items from the board? Okay.
We'll also have to have we'll bring the rule back to you at that time. Between now and your next meeting, we intend to have it published and bring it back to you for recommendations to go to the commission.
Yeah, for that other one.
Yep. Good. Okay. So no more agenda items? Okay, we'll close that one and go to agenda, item K, discuss date and time and location of upcoming board meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we've got some dates here after consulting with our general counsel. We've got 2 dates in May and 2 in April. We have Tuesday, May 1st, Monday, May 7th. That give you a little more time than April?
About April, what do we got in April?
April, we have April 4th, a Wednesday, and Thursday, April 5th.
Those dates were, I guess, I'm sorry, were proposed before I had an understanding that you would want to bring the adoption of the code issues back to the board for consideration. And so I would think that we need a little bit more time in order to float the discussion inside the agency, run all the necessary traps before we engage in a discussion about adoption. And so I would recommend that we push this out through the end of May, early June, in order to allow sufficient time to process it properly.
And Mary Winston, I'm going to say again, Charles will be gone. So to get to the proper staff member who will still be working here, we do need that time because they have other rule packets that they're drafting.
This is Lawrence. I was going to seek the advice of the elevator department and ask them about, because the vast majority of the work on this is going to come there. Do you have a good estimate of how long you think it would take you to be prepared to do whatever miracles you guys do behind the scenes to make this stuff work?
My comments, Ms. Taylor, and I defer to Ms. Marin about the workload of compliance division. My comments were more agency-wide, a larger audience, that we can't not control their schedule, and there's 20 or 30-plus programs in line for consideration. And so it'd be easier for us I think more efficient to set a meeting that's outward than to bring it in and have to cancel it.
And I understand that, and this is Lawrence again, but I thought it would be helpful for the rest of the agency to get an idea how long it would take for him to do his thing before you guys start to do yours.
Yes, sir,
It doesn't matter at this point, I don't think.
The other parts of the agency, they're not present, so
You mean they're not watching on YouTube?
I hope not.
Because we pay for that conference.
But to commit them prematurely, I think doesn't serve us well.
Again, Brian Morris, so it sounds like that we're looking at no earlier than April and no later than June. April, May, June time period.
Yes, sir. And maybe the correct approach is to have those dates out there, but not set one until we can confer with the exec and get some feedback about the agency's workload and how this fits into the bigger picture.
Okay. I guess, does anybody on the board have a global problem with any of those months? You're not leaving town for
This is Lawrence. My only concern about pushing it back too far is we've effectively done pushing it back as if we had a work group to push it back. And because of the public notice, the Texas Register, the times that are required in that, historically, new codes in this state have taken, elevator code anyway, have taken effect on a September 1st. And I would like to see whatever we try to do to sit in that same time frame so that we have enough time from the meeting, should that go well and everybody be satisfied, to get it through the public hearing and the Texas Register and the comments to try to meet that no later than September 1st effective date.
And Mary Winston again, and that's why I really reached out to, well, again, Molly's in a conference, to get all of that posted and public comment and so forth, yes, we will be working Jim to the bone, or David will be. But we also will have general counsel staff that we will be working to the bone. And so that's what we're trying to accommodate. The September one, I don't even want to speak to that. I really don't. In my mind, it sounds good, but I don't know the workload of every staff member. I believe, Charles, you said May, late May?
Yeah, I think we know at this point there are commission meetings set in April and May. And so those dates that were pushed out there were to schedule a meeting to allow the board to meet and in sufficient time to get it to the commission for its meeting. But that was before there was a recognition that you were wanting to move the code to that meeting as well. And that's why I would recommend that we push it out at least until till early June in order to accommodate the additional issues.
John McGraw, I don't have any problem leaving the upcoming date in limbo until y'all decide what time frame you need, and if you can do it quicker,
Yes, sir.
we meet quicker.
I think it'd be more efficient to set those dates out there as wholly as a placeholder.
Yeah.
Allow us to consult with executive offices to see their schedule and to look at the bigger picture and schedule it in that context, given the magnitude of the issues that you intend to discuss.
All right.
Then, Scott, and then as a placeholder, let's just go with the May 1, and then, just so it's a placeholder, let's just go with May 1.
Is that one of the available dates?
I think he said May 1.
Yes. May 1,
With
May
the-
7.
with the
Tuesday, May 1, or
Yeah,
Monday,
just,
May
that's
7.
just, oh, okay, now we got a date. Then we'll,
If it needs to move, we'll
if
move
it needs to move, you'll let us know, I'm sure.
Agreed. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, board members, for being here. Appreciate it. We haven't had this many here in a long time, so it's really nice to have everybody here and TDLR staff. All right. With that, the meeting is adjourned.